Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Get comfy as I tell you a story of one man's greed for eternal life. Pharaoh Anktipot ruled centuries ago in the great desert land of Har'Akir. He, like most of his culture, was obsessed with death. The religion of the people revolved around death, and the pharaoh was the link between man and the gods. Anktipot himself was a priest of Ra, the sun god. Anktipot commanded his priests to find a way for him to live forever. Many slaves and prisoners died horribly as subjects in Anktipot's gruesome experiments. Totally frustrated with the lack of success, the pharaoh had several temples burned and razed. He stalked into the Karn temple, greatest of all in Har'Akir, and cursed the gods for not granting him his heart's desire. Ra, sun god and patron of pharaohs, answered him. He told the pharaoh that he would live even after death, though he might wish otherwise. Anktipot left the temple, elated but confused. He still did not know how to cheat death. That night, everyone he touched died. His wife, several servants, and his eldest child all were dead. According to custom, they were mummified and entombed in the great buildings in the desert. Soon the great pharaoh came to understand his curse. So long as Ra shone upon him, he was safe. But once he was no longer under the sun's watchful eye, whomever he touched died horribly. Shortly after the final ceremony of his wife's funeral, Anktipot was visited in the night. A mummy wrapped in funeral linens entered his chambers. By the vestments he knew it was Nefer. He fled from her down the long halls of the place. Finally, she cornered him. Unable to talk, the mummy Nefer tried to embrace Anktipot. Horrified, he screamed for her to leave him forever. She turned and left. Nefer walked into the desert and was never seen again. Her tomb remained open and empty. Anktipot was also visited by the mummified bodies of others whom he had killed. He came to understand that he controlled them utterly. They did his every bidding. He used their strength and his own touch of death to tighten the reins of his evil power over Har'Akir. He killed many of the kingdom's priests, making them undead slaves. Occasionally he would find one of his mummies destroyed, burned from the inside out. Anktipot was convinced that Nefer was responsible, but he had no proof of this. One day the priests rebelled against the pharaoh and murdered him in his sleep. The funeral lasted for the whole month. During it, Anktipot was awake and helpless, trapped inside his own corpse. His mind screamed as they mummified his body. He was nearly insane when they entombed him. As the sun set and Ra's power waned, the borders of Ravenloft seeped into the desert kingdom to steal away the tomb of Anktipot and the nearby small village of Muhar. When the priests returned to visit his tomb, all they found was sand and rock. It was as if the village of Muhar and Anktipot's tomb had never even existed. Upon entering Ravenloft, Anktipot discovered that he once again had control over his body. He now rules a small mud village in the middle of a barren wasteland. It is a bitter end for a man who once ruled a great nation and wielded great personal power. Anktipot spends decades at a time dreaming in his smoldering tomb. He can neither sleep nor die, but he can forget the world for a time and dream again of the pleasures of the flesh and the power of having a nation to do his bidding. It takes a notable event to awaken the pharaoh mummy. He can feel some of the happenings in the land for the people of Muhar. If they feel great anxiety, then he might put aside his dream long enough to investigate. Any excursion of Anktipot from his tomb usually ends in death and destruction. Anktipot's most fervent dream is to be human again. He would even take up the mantle of mortality and die a natural death if he could but rule a few years as a normal man. Of course, he does not envision himself as a peasant or commoner. He would only accept a station in life as great as he once held. He would rather die than not. In a cruel twist, Mist has granted him the power to be human again, but at a high cost. He can drain a man of life in a sunrise ceremony and be restored to his human form. Should he die, Anktipot stays dead unless his body is mummified and entombed. In that case, he is a mummy once again, with all of his powers. If Anktipot is a normal, living human and the sun sets, his body returns to its mummified condition and he regains all of his supernatural powers. Anktipot needs only to drink another human before the sun sets to offset this effect. He could be human again for a few months by sacrificing all of the Muhar villages, but once they were all dead, he would be alone forever, and Anktipot chooses not to do this. Instead, he waits. Thank you so much for sticking around, patient listeners. Do not weep for Ankhtbot or his subjects, as they will not give your death a second thought if it keeps them alive for another day. And as always, take care while crossing the mists.